April 16th, 2024 Redevelopment Agency Board meeting. Our meetings are public, and you're welcome to join us in person on Zoom, watching SLC TV, our Facebook and YouTube pages, and we hope you continue to join us in whichever manner you feel more comfortable. We begin with A1, comments and comments to the board. And I would like to remind everyone that comments could be submitted to the RDA through mail at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114. You can also email those comments to council.comments@slcgov.com, or you can also use our 24-hour phone line at 801-535-7654. Thank you for joining us today. And before we start, I want to remind everyone about the rules of decorum, which are in place to ensure our meetings move along well and to help everybody feel comfortable when sharing their comments. A copy of the full rules of decorum are available outside the room or online for those that are on Zoom. If you would like to make general comment today, we're accepting comments in person and online on Zoom. Scott Corpany from our staff will moderate our Zoom and will continue with any questions about your registration. I think I messed that one up. Scott Company from our staff will moderate our Zoom, and I will message you with any questions about your registration. If you need to speak to our staff, please select Scott from the list of participants. You can also raise your hand on Zoom to make sure that they contact you. Please minimize the comments to technical issues as the staff is handling a lot of tasks. Taylor Hill and our staff will be calling those who wish to comment based on the order we'll receive the names. If we are on Zoom, please unmute your microphone when Taylor calls your name. We will now open for general comment period. Taylor, please start with our first comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are two people registered for general comment. The first will be Nathan Strain, followed by Aiden Goodard. Nathan is here in person.
All right, thank you for taking my comment today. I would like to comment on agenda item number 3.
Could you use the microphone a little closer? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. The Rio Grand District. I love seeing this plan. It looks amazing. We have wonderful potential to redevelop a district in our city that is presently somewhat unsightly and disconnected. I do have some concerns, however. We are going to see a lot more people living and working in that part of town, along with the nearby power district. We're going to see tens of thousands of new residential units and residents. Presently, UTA and UDOT are planning to double the frequency of front-runner trains through downtown Salt Lake City. We're going to see a lot more people having to use already congested railroad crossings that are going to see double the number of trains by the end of the decade. Presently, Salt Lake City has the opportunity to collaborate with state and federal stakeholders to develop the Rio Grande plan, which would increase the size of developable area by around 76 acres, which is substantially larger than the plan includes right now. And it would offer a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to grade separate these railroad tracks, which would reduce fatalities and make a much safer community for everybody, both everybody who lives there now and everybody who will live there in the future in these new districts that we're developing. And that is my comment. Thank you.
And next will be Aiden Goodard, who's here in person.
Hello, my name is Aiden. I'm a lifelong Salt Lake City resident, and last year I competed internationally as a member of the USA Climbing National Development Team, which is based here in Salt Lake City. I'd like to share with you what I learned in my travel that makes me excited for what we have in opportunity here. The Rio Grande Plan, the USA Climbing National Training Center project, the Green Loop, tracks expansion, and many other projects come together in this one area. If planned properly, they have the potential to complement each other. But if done individually, they can get in each other's way and hinder the final outcome. While traveling in Switzerland last year, I rode on Stadler Trains, a company that has a facility here in Salt Lake City. I experienced firsthand what frequent, clean, and high-quality public transit can do, and what great station area plans do in terms of urban form, and also in terms of allowing people who wish to the freedom to live car-free. In Austria, I competed at Kletterzentrum Innsbruck. It's a climbing facility that is the inspiration for USA Climbing's facility. It is a pillar of the community in Innsbruck, and it hosts yearly events with thousands of spectators. My hope is that we have ambition to bring these projects together in a way that suits the needs of the residents of our city, and that we're ambitious in doing so. Thank you.
That was the final registered comment.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for providing comments to the board. Are there any other comments present here, maybe in person? Okay. We're going to do some shuffling on the agenda. We're going to skip item B for a moment. We're going to move to items under C, so the redevelopment agency business. And the first one is the approval of minutes, C1. I need a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the meeting minutes of February 13th, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion on the table by Board Member Dugan and a second by Board Member Mano. Any discussion? Gonna call the question. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries unanimously with Board Member Wharton, Petro absent. Let's move to item C2, the resolution annual housing funding priorities fiscal year 2024-2025. Allison Rowland, Council Policy Analyst at the table. Tracy Tran, Senior Project Manager. Lauren Parisi, Senior Project Manager of the RDA as well. Allison, take it away.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a follow-up discussion of with RDA staff on the proposed fiscal year 2025 housing development funding strategy. It focuses on how to carry out annual housing priorities and housing activities. RDA staff introduced their proposed housing development funding strategy in March and will review additional information from their April transmittal today. The four priorities discussed last time were deeply affordable housing, in other words, under 40% AMI, affordable family housing, wealth building opportunities, neighborhood and commercial services. And then they will be proposing one additional new priority. So for today, the board can vote on or postpone, if you'd rather, the proposed fiscal year 2025 housing priorities. That's that list I just read plus the additional one. The preliminary budget estimates and specific proposals for using RDA funds will be available in May, and also in May as part of the RDA's annual budget process. The board approval will be needed for both the amount of annual RDA revenue to be allocated among the four housing funds. These are the primary, secondary, Housing Development Loan Fund, and Westside Community Initiative, and also the specific allocations among housing activities. For example, HDLP loans versus emergency gap financing loans versus property acquisition. So those things are coming in May. For now, you have the possibility to vote on these housing priorities, and I believe that would simplify the job for RDA staff, so I'll turn it over to them. Oh, there are also a number of policy questions, of course, in the staff report.
Great, good afternoon, everyone. If we can go to the next slide. So last month we brought to you the fiscal year 2024-2025 housing development funding strategy, which gave an overview of our priorities and activities for the for this previous fiscal year, a review of the current housing data and the city's housing goals and proposed annual housing funding priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. Today, we've returned to finalize with the board the annual housing funding priorities. So we'll quickly run through a few slides to provide an overview of the annual housing funding priorities. As background, the RDA's housing allocation funds policy, which was adopted in 2021, establishes the RDA's 4 housing funds. Each of these funds have unique funding sources, eligible uses, and policy priorities. This policy dictates that prior to the annual budget process, the RDA Board of Directors adopts a housing development funding strategy made up of the 3 major components, including 1, the projected amount of revenue to be allocated to each of the 4 housing funds, 2, the annual housing funding priorities for the upcoming fiscal year, which is the board's focus today. So these shall be approved via resolution. And 3, the housing activities, which will fund specific activities and will be approved as line items within the budget. Next slide. So as discussed last month, our recommended annual housing priorities include 1, a wealth building opportunity, which will focus on the ability for low to moderate income households to build wealth through different pathways, such as through homeownership, supplemental income opportunities, stipends for renters, cooperative housing, and other wealth building models. 2 would be affordable family housing with amenities for children. This focuses on affordable units with 3 or more bedrooms and includes amenities for children. The 3rd would be deeply affordable housing, which focuses on affordable units for those earning 40% AMI and below. And then we have the neighborhood commercial and services, which ensures that as housing continues to be built throughout the city, residents continue to have access to neighborhood services and retail. And lastly, this is one that we did not discuss last month. However, last month, the board had allocated the majority of the high opportunity area funds. And so we're proposing that to also include expand opportunity as a housing priority this year to ensure that there is still focus on having affordable housing in the east side and in high opportunity areas, and it's not just concentrated in certain areas of the city. All right, and those are the 5 recommended housing priorities for the year. And we'd like board feedback on that. Next slide, please. And this is just a reminder of the high opportunity areas within the city. This was, the board had seen this in November of 2023. So this was the new map with the new metrics that the RDA is using as high opportunity areas. Next slide. And then just to give an overview of some of the data we went through last month, just some metrics. 1, homeownership rate is growing at a slower pace than rental rates, and at least 88,431 renting households fall in the extremely low income limit set by HUD for fiscal year 23. The percentage of family households have been decreasing within Salt Lake City since 2018. For higher income households making $75,000 or more have increased within Salt Lake City through the years. Lower income households making less than $50,000 have decreased. And 5, the number of commercial parcels have decreased within Salt Lake City. And 6, commercial growth is slowing while occupancy and lease rates have increased. Next slide. And this is a map showing current and future, let me back up, thank you. One more slide to the map. 2 more slides forward. Thank you. And so this is a map showing the current and future Salt Lake City deed restricted affordable housing development maps. So this is another reason why we wanted to add the opportunity, the expand opportunity priority, just to ensure that there is an ability to incentivize affordable housing located in high opportunity areas and on the east side of Salt Lake City. Next slide.
So as presented at the last meeting, the proposed housing activities to carry out those priorities include releasing a notice of funding availability specific to equity building models to promote home ownership. We'll also release our annual housing development loan program, NOFA, that tends to support rental products. And then we'll also continue to buy property for the development of housing with these specific priorities. You may wish as a board to discuss if there are any other housing activities to be funded, so staff can look at, can budget accordingly. Next slide. The Housing Development Loan Program, NOFA, will require, again, like it did this year and the previous year, that all projects either have affordable family housing or deeply affordable housing. And then those other housing priorities proposed this year will be weighted more heavily than other public benefits as we review the NOFA applications. Next slide. So again, these are the three components that make up the annual housing funding strategy. The priorities, we're proposing the 5 here, the housing activities, and then the housing fund allocations. Those second 2 you'll see in the RDA budget. Next slide. So with that, the board may wish to consider the adoption of the 5 priorities for the year and let us know if you have any additional questions. Thanks.
I have a question from board member Young online, so let's go there first, and it seems like there might be some other questions here.
Great, thank you. I just had a question about the additional expand opportunity priority under the annual housing priorities. I appreciate through my lens of priority, that means that they would be given kind of additional or higher priority consideration. Can you talk to me if that creates any sort of limitations, specifically if RDA were to have another housing project that fell outside of that map, just kind of how that would play out?
Well, you go ahead.
Yes, so I just wanted to check, so by adding the additional priority, would that create any limitations? Is that the question? Okay, so I don't think it would. I think it would just allow for, it just would allow us to further incentivize any additional affordable housing that's located within high opportunity areas. I don't necessarily see any limitations to.
Yeah, I kind of see it coming into play when we put out those notice of funding availability and things are competitive, and if projects come in and are located within a high opportunity area, they would receive that higher weight, but other projects would certainly still be considered based on the other public benefits that they offer. I also kind of see it as if there's an acquisition opportunity that comes up in a high opportunity area, we would kind of prioritize that as well. But I don't think it would limit other projects from being funded.
Great, thank you for clarifying.
Board member Mano.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Can you clarify for what you're hoping that we would approve today, or what we could potentially approve today, is just the housing priorities, not the allocations or the activities? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct.
I feel okay about the now 5 housing priorities. I think that those seem in line. The one question that I do have, and maybe this is for another meeting or another month, is I'm not sure. I'm supportive of a NOFA for wealth building opportunities, but not supportive of that taking priority over the ADU funding tool specifically in the 9 line, because that's part of our responsibility within the 9 line project area. But I'd also like to think about that being expanded to ADUs and affordable housing incentives projects within any R1 zone throughout the city. So personally, I would like to have that small affordable housing incentives and ADU. I don't know if that needs to be a separate NOFA or what that looks like, but I'd like that to be prioritized, happening faster than the equity building NOFA, though I'm supportive of both.
Okay, Thanks for that comment. And we do have the ADU program RFP in the works, so that will definitely be prioritized.
Thanks.
Board Member Dugan.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. Again, a couple of questions, and it kind of expanding on Councilmember or Board Member Young's question about the expanded opportunity and in the those neighborhoods. Now we have these 5 priorities, but how do we weigh them? Because I can see all the other ones being individual ones, this one not quite being an individual one, but kind of like supplementing the other 4 priorities. And so how do we, what's our mechanism to weighing the priorities if we have a limited amount of funds and we have these 3 projects that are looking for that funding? How do we weigh which ones gets more weight than the others?
Yeah, so the expand opportunity one, I think, comes into play mostly within the housing development loan program. So I think all 5 of the priorities play well into the housing development loan program, NOFA. So there is one pot of funds for those. So for any projects that apply for those, they would have, they could meet a lot of those different priorities and score higher by meeting multiple priorities. I don't know if that answers.
I guess I probably need more of a spreadsheet on how they're weighed as far as a point scale from 1 to 100, how that works out.
Yeah, so how we've done it in the past, so anything that's considered a priority would get 3 times, like basically 3 points for meeting the priority, whereas if it's not, it's just like another benefit that they're meeting, they would get 1 point.
But the categories are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
So you could get expand opportunity and deeply affordable in the same project, and that would accumulate more points for that particular project.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Thanks. And one more question on the, we use now the terms amenities for children, and then we had family-oriented. What's the difference?
You want me to take that one? Or are you guys good? We were just, in the staff report, which may be where you're drawing that, I think the difference is that it turns out HUD has a fairly strict definition of what a family is. And actually, it's not strict. It's actually wider than we may be thinking about it when we use family in sort of informal conversation while we're talking about policy. So for HUD, any group of people who presents as a family is considered a family. So there's no judgment by HUD over, you guys are a family, you aren't, right? So they don't get to choose 2 people of the same age, an adult child plus one of their parents could be a family. It's anyone who says they're a family. Now, the city typically follows HUD policy, but I don't believe it's typically bound by HUD policy. So it's pretty much a fine point whether you would like to call the affordable housing for families, whether you would like to call it for families or for families with children or strictly for children. But there's just a little bit of ambiguity that I worried about because it seems like the conversation among board members is about families with children. That's why you want extra bedrooms. So that's as far as I can take it.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. And I just wanted to add, I think our intent was amenities for families maybe could be interpreted as something more broad, like amenities that we already see, like a pool or a fitness center. That's for a family, but we specifically wanted to target children, like having a playground, maybe having a daycare, something like that. That's more intentional. That would be for a younger population. So that was, I think, our intent there.
Okay, great. And I applaud that because that's exactly what I was looking at is like daycares, playgrounds, those opportunities for kids, vice just a family of young adults that aren't looking for that portion of it. Okay, thank you.
Chair, may I wanted to ask a question. Do we feel confident that these 5 priorities will help build home ownership opportunities? I think they can be catalysts, but this is something that we're not seeing a lot of in the market. That's still an issue, whether it's for wealth generation or for protecting families in the general Salt Lake City vicinity.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's something we've been trying to work through the last couple years, because I think we do have a way of funding homeownership through our housing development loan program, but it's really not conducive for like an ownership, it's more conducive, that program is more conducive for rentals than ownership projects. And I think if we, our thinking is focusing a pot of money that's specific to homeownership would be helpful. Again, this is just, we'll have to do a little more just research and making sure like we are targeting the right metrics and the right funding sources that we can address the homeownership issue.
Because as much as I love the community land trust we have, I'd love to see that articulated in these 5 priorities a little bit better. If there's a way to fit in the definition in articulating the NOFA priorities, I think that's something that we're missing.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I definitely, sincerely, I agree with that, especially because we've been putting quite a bit of effort on putting some money aside for this project, for this, and hopefully we see one project come to in line very soon. Board Member Petra?
Doesn't this beg, though, the policy consideration of where those programs live? And I know there's always been a little bit of a dotted line here of like a semi-permeable membrane between RDA and the work of CAN. And so I think we probably need a little more clarity on how we're divvying those things up, because I'm with you. I want that sort of community wealth building, but it does feel like there's a lack of clarity if this is the right place, or if that's where we want things to exist.
Into the RDA board, so many of the projects where RDA is just a rental desert today. And so communities thrive when we have mixed supply of units, and we see a lack in the downtown in particular, and parts of the west side now, where we don't have home ownership opportunities anymore. So I'd like to see that. I'd love to see some of these construction projects have mixed home ownership and rental in them.
And that is an interesting concept right there, right? Mixing those two. And I don't know if we have seen a lot of that happening, if any. But I certainly, it is hard for any municipality, and this is how I try to wrap my head around this issue of the shortage of housing and the crisis that we see on this. Is Salt Lake City trying to solve a market issue that is bigger than us and bigger than all of our budgets combined. And we're trying to make strides to that purpose and set aside some policies, some carrots and some sticks, some incentives for developers to take that ultimately they don't have to take. And some sticks that within the rules that we have. Just on the issue, and I would like to underline a comment, and certainly I agree with everything said here today, but the 9 line and the additional and alternative incentives to ADUs, even expanding the areas. But certainly the 9 line is a focus, and I would love to see some of those ADUs come online. And just on the report from our staff, it's mentioned to get an updated regular updates on fund balances on each of the housing funds. That I would love to see some of that. So then we can prioritize a little better. To me, prioritizing when I don't really know how much money we have to prioritize makes no sense. And I understand that we have goals, but not knowing what figures they are behind means less to me. So if we could add some regular updates on some of that, that will help us. That will help. I believe it will help this board to understand that better. So. And another thing that is mentioned on the report that I believe that is going to be more important and has become more important over the years is what happens when there is surpluses, but more importantly, what happens when there is shortfalls, right? When there is with more money needed, and do we have a plan for to come to those? Because the cost of construction is changing quite a bit still. Still very complex for many developers to pinpoint the price on that, but also in all of our projects, right? And I just want to know if there is a plan to address that ahead. And one of the questions from the staff report, and I would like to underline that one personally. Any other comments here? Board members?
Do you want a
Chair?
motion?
I believe, hold on. I want to make sure that I didn't miss anybody online, so yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the Affordable Housing Fund priority list for fiscal year 2024 to 25.
Second.
That was a very quiet second. I have a motion by Board Member Dugan and a second by Board Member Mano. Any discussion on this motion? Okay, I am going to call the question. All of those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Seems like this motion carries unanimously with everybody present. It did. Yeah, I did hear Councilmember Young. Is that, was I correct?
You're correct. It was an aye.
Yes. Thank you for that. I appreciate the discussion on the priorities. We're continuing to on item C, going to C3 right now, informational Rio Grande District Vision and Implementation Plan. We're going to welcome at the table our RDA awesome team, Donnie, Kara, Ashley, it seems like maybe, and anybody else is welcome too. So go ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us back to discuss this very exciting project. I'm here because our team has completed our work on the Rio Grande District Vision and Implementation Plan. And we're excited to provide a summary of its contents and recommendations with you all today. As you can see on this slide, we do have a very ambitious vision for the district, but it feels appropriate as we have such an important opportunity in front of us to create a neighborhood that's a model of the type of development we want to see in Salt Lake City. It takes advantage of density and transit access to squeeze in as many community benefits as possible into the site and continues to generate value over time as a maintained asset for the city. The planning process that we just completed was crucial for establishing a comprehensive vision for the neighborhood and identifying actionable next steps that the RDA should take to see it come to fruition. Next slide, please. So I want to start off by noting the name change. For many years, this project has been referred to as Station Center. We did receive feedback that there was confusion from similar names being used for other landmarks in the area. We also wanted to make sure that we were using the best possible name as we, before we start marketing RDA properties and building out the district. So after some brainstorming with staff, we landed on Rio Grande District, which is pretty straightforward, but it does pay, it's an homage to the iconic Depot building. It's a descriptor that's already commonly used for the neighborhood, and it's also a name that we feel can live on past the life of the redevelopment project. Next slide.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was really, we actually had fun.
Thank you enough.
Coming up with names. So 2 RDA-owned property assemblages were considered in this plan. The primary focus in the document is the area that we now refer to as the Rio Grande District, which includes about 11 acres within the bounds of 200 to 400 south and 500 to 600 west. The RDA also owns about 4 acres of property to the north along 100 south, just west of 600 west. We didn't take as deep of a dive into the 100 South properties, but recommendations for the future of that site is included in the plan's appendix. Next slide. And this is just to provide more site context, a different perspective of the Rio Grande District area. Next slide. So next I'll cover the components of the plan that make up its vision, and in a future section I'll get into the implementation piece. So next slide. So this is our guiding vision statement for the district, which I know I've shared with you all before, but the Rio Grande District places community wellness at the heart of its design framework. The neon glow of the Rio Grande sign shining atop the historic depot is a beacon, welcoming all Utahns to be a part of a robust new downtown neighborhood located at Utah's most transit-rich gateway. Next slide. And the design that we landed on serves the two guiding ambitions that we established at the outset of our planning process. So the first, we knew that the Rio Grande District had the potential to be the best transit-oriented development site in Utah. We also knew we wanted the Rio Grande District to be an urban neighborhood committed to advancing community wellness and delivering equitable outcomes. Next slide. Our conversations with the community revealed common themes and observations that are critical to users and neighbors of the district. And we distilled these into 11 design moves that form the foundation of the plan. And they include establishing compact walkable blocks, restoring the site for all living things, enabling low carbon mobility, championing the green loop, ensuring functional roadways, leading with a shared parking strategy, curating public places with arts, culture, and performance, strengthening our social fabric, catalyzing street life and mixed-use development, maximizing our TOD potential, and designing sustainable infrastructure and buildings. Next slide. So the rest of the vision section outlines design standards and guidelines for new open spaces, streets, and buildings. When reviewing future development proposals, the RDA will prioritize projects that comply with these standards and guidelines. We'll also hold ourselves to the same standards when designing the public improvements that I'll describe in a second. And I'm going to run through some of the primary elements of the plan and general intent of the associated design standards. I'm going to try to be brief with these, but feel free to stop me if you have any questions. Next slide. So the public realm, the heart of the plan is a network of unique public spaces, like the 300 South Festival Street, Arts Campus Alley, the 5th West section of the Green Loop, and the Underpass Park. Next slide. 300 South will be reconstructed into a festival street with a curbless design and retractable bollards that will allow us to close the street for community events. The plan calls this a major shopping street with ground floor uses that spill out into the street with signature furnishings, lighting, and public art within the right-of-way. And the festival street will reinforce the view corridor between the intermodal hub, which UTA is currently redesigning, and the Rio Grande Depot building. Next slide. And building on the great work that the Art Space organization is already doing on the North Block, the plan includes an Arts Campus Alley, which will be a plaza for art installations, cultural events, and performances with adjacent ground floor maker spaces for emerging. And that alley, will visually connect Art Space's historic Macaroni Flats building with the Salt Lake Mattress building that the RDA owns to the south. Next slide. Sorry. And the downtown master plan shows the green loop alignment running through the project along 500 West. The RDA isn't leading the city's green loop effort, but our consultant team developed a conceptual design for the section that is planned to run through our district, as it will be a critical part of our mobility network and also provide much needed open space and areas for recreation. Next slide. So this is a rendering of the concept that our team came up with for the green loop. And we have shared our work with the Green Loop team and have been coordinating with them. We look forward to continuing to work with them on design and build out. Next slide. This is our last open space, but just to the south of the district is the 400 South Viaduct, which has a bit of a dead zone underneath it that we're proposing to activate with something fun like a skate park or basketball courts and public art. Next slide. So moving on to our mobility network, this drawing highlights our street improvements, which involve breaking up the large blocks with new mid-block connections to create a more walkable urban environment and compact development parcels. The network accommodates all modes of travel, but has an emphasis on people-powered modes and direct connections to transit. Next slide. So as such, the plan calls for low-stress pedestrian and bicycle facilities that are connected to the UTA intermodal hub. And this includes generous sidewalks, buffered bike lanes, and slow streets to improve safety and convenience of pedestrians and cyclists. The plan also calls for the creation of a pedestrian connection through the Rio Grande Depot building, as that is a bit of a barrier for east-west movement right now. Next slide. And I think we all, we presented on this last December, but the shared parking strategy, we often say the site has the potential to be the best TOD in the state, but for that to happen, we have to not only accommodate active modes of transportation, but also try to reduce the impact of private vehicles. The plan recommends that new development is capped with progressive parking ratios that our market has not yet provided. For this to be successful, the RDA and developers will need to encourage aggressive parking and transportation demand management strategies, such as unbundled and shared parking arrangements. And in an effort to get ahead of this, the RDA would like to lead out with the construction of the shared parking structure that we've discussed in the past, near the intersection of 500 West and 400 South. And again, our goal is to concentrate mass parking in one spot at the edge of the district, and reduce the amount of parking that's provided within each individual development site. And our traffic and parking study also found there's excess existing parking near the site, and the plan notes an opportunity to take advantage of some of that capacity in the future, potentially through a connector shuttle that connects the district to that off-site parking. Next slide. And this is our last design section, land use and urban form. This is a primary gateway to the city, and we want to ensure that it's a memorable destination and has a distinct sense of place. The plan recommends high-density development to capitalize on adjacent transit with a balanced mix of uses to invite people in and activate the district at various times of day. Next slide. So as you can see here, the plan isn't extremely prescriptive when it comes to land uses, but our design guidelines encourage a high-intensity employment hub along 600 West on blocks E and F. And our goal is to support the Tech Lake City initiative with incubator lab and office space for our growing life sciences industry. And also, per the zoning ordinance, 500 West is intended to be a residential corridor. And as such, the plan calls for blocks A and C to contain residential mixed use. And block D also contains residential mixed use to kind of provide a smooth transition down to the existing residential on 200 South. And I did want to note the RDA does not own what's shown as blocks F and G, but we did get permission from those property owners to include them in our plan. And we intend to keep working with them to make sure that our projects are all complementary. Next slide. The plan prioritizes activated ground floors wherever possible to foster vibrant street life and pedestrian experience. This slide illustrates various ground floor character zones that each have their own standards that are unique to their location. So for example, the areas shown in pink they make up our makerspace zone, and those are intended to include light industrial, production, fabrication, manufacturing, and studios for local artists and artisans. The dark red areas on the 300 South Festival Street is the festival retail zone, and that represents the highest level of intensity of shops, cafes, and retail in the district. And we're really excited to use the Rio Grand District to test out some of our pending commercial assistance initiatives, which would prioritize establishing a critical mass of retailers to make the district a known destination for shopping at small local businesses or seeing artists at work. Next slide. The RDA we've discussed this before too, but we're looking to increase permitted building heights to capitalize on the opportunity to add some density into what we feel is an appropriate location for it. So we've been coordinating with the planning division on a text amendment to allow for taller building heights within the gateway mixed use zone, which is the zoning district. Taller heights and additional density would bring a lot of positive impact to the neighborhood, especially a TOD. But one important benefit is that it will increase the RDA and developers' ability to infuse community benefits into the district. So for example, added residential density will increase a developer's ability to generate revenue that can offset the cost of including some of the board's affordable housing priorities. More square footage, only brings more opportunity to include exciting and beneficial uses, and potentially subsidize the cost of them. Next slide. And our standards have a strong focus on sustainable infrastructure and building design. The RDA is planning to make water, sewer, stormwater, and electrical upgrades, and our design team's already been meeting with public utilities to master plan those improvements. We'll also work with developers to influence the design of their projects to push the bounds of what the market currently provides when it comes to sustainable building design. We have a strong interest in all-electric buildings, mass timber construction, and the use of renewables, to name a few. We also plan to adaptively reuse the few historic warehouses that are left in the Warehouse National Historic District. So the picture on the left is the Salt Lake Mattress Company building, which the RDA owns both of these buildings, but the one on the left is Salt Lake Mattress, and the one on the right we just refer to as the Blue Warehouse, but it's on the corner of 5th West and 4th South. Next slide. And I wanted to include a slide on community benefits. You know, we've talked a lot about physical infrastructure so far, but this will be a district that also delivers social benefits. Social infrastructure that enables all people to thrive with access to public amenities and events, healthy food, housing, employment, education, and recreation. This list isn't exhaustive or set in stone, but it does include some of the priorities that we heard in stakeholder meetings, as well as priorities of the RDA and city. And these are examples of community benefits that the RDA will prioritize when reviewing future development proposals, and it is our intent to squeeze as many as possible into the district. And this concludes the visioning piece of the plan. You know, again, we know it's ambitious when it comes to density, the design, the desired community impact. It's going to take a lot of hard work, persistence, and collaboration to see it through. Next slide, please. So how can the RDA and city make this project happen? Luckily, our plan includes an implementation piece to help us with this. And I did want to provide some background on this piece, as the term governance framework sounds very serious and formal, but it's really just the result of research done by our consultant team, who have a lot of experience organizing and administering innovation districts and master plan developments. So they started by looking into the RDA's organizational structure, policies, and procedures, and they made recommendations for how the RDA can implement this project under our existing structure using our existing tools. And this was in response to feedback that we received from the board on this topic in past meetings. So when I read this section, I basically see it as my to-do list as the RDA project manager who's responsible for the success of the district. And it is helpful to have some guidance on steps that should be taken to advance the vision. And it's also helpful for the RDA to have some projections on resources that may be needed as the project progresses. Next slide. The first thing considered in this section is the various roles that will need to be filled to ensure the long-term success of the district. The RDA is technically the master developer of the Rio Grande District and will need to play a pivotal role in all aspects of the project. As the primary landowner, we plan to facilitate the development of RDA-owned properties with ground leases to developers. As the infrastructure developer, we will design, construct, manage, and maintain the public improvements, of course in partnership with the city. As the programming manager, we'll lead the activation of the Rio Grande in collaboration with adjacent property owners, tenants, and local organizations. And as the district curator, we'll have an opportunity to use our tools to incentivize other parties to advance our vision and policy goals. Next slide. So this is referred to in the document as the governance framework matrix, and it builds on the needed roles that I just described by listing the functional goals of each role and then the anticipated staffing and funding needs over time as the neighborhood is built out. Next slide. So this is an example of what the governance framework matrix looks like during the startup phase, phase one, which is about where we are right now. So on the left side, you know, there's really only 2 roles, 2 out of 4 roles that are really in play in this early phase, so landowner and infrastructure developer. I like to start looking at the functional goals column on the far right. That's what I kind of refer to as, you know, a project manager's to-do list. You know, get through this planning and visioning process, start crafting RFPs for developers for some of the sites, finding development partners, negotiating that transaction. And then the other two columns just consider, you know, resources needed during this phase to achieve those functional goals. So in this matrix, it highlights funding needs and staffing and support needs. Next slide. So the governance framework concludes with a recommended set of next steps to initiate governance of the Rio Grande District and advance our vision. The first recommended next step is to align neighborhood stakeholders. So we should continue to meet with neighborhood property owners, potential programming partners, and relevant city departments to form a working group that can inform the project as it progresses. The second recommended next step is to start conducting business planning for the successful operation of the district. And the third next step is to consider whether the project calls for the creation of RDA policies that are specific to the Rio Grande District to better support its implementation and what the plan calls for. And that's just, you know, that's not set in stone or anything like that, but that's a recommendation to kind of, you know, as we have development partners on board, negotiating deals, you know, are there things that could maybe help us move faster in those conversations and negotiations, kind of moving more at the pace of business, that having district-specific policies would allow. But that's just a recommendation that the consultants made based on their experience in other districts. Next slide. This is my last slide. So these are overall next steps for the project as a whole, not just governance. We have been planning to publish the vision and implementation plan on a project webpage that would be launched after this meeting. That webpage will be hosted at slcrda.com, and we'll continue to update it with project updates, and the document will be housed there as well. We are coordinating with planning on a zoning text amendment to allow for the taller building heights, hoping to submit that soon. We're also compiling, RDA staff's working on an HTRZ application. This one would be centered on the UTA Intermodal Hub, so that would help us implement this project and help us with our funding and financing needs. Need to develop construction drawings for the public improvements, the utilities, streets, and then also craft a developer RFP for some sites on the North Block. And we're hoping to get an RFP out in the next few months. That's everything. So happy to answer questions.
Board Member Dugan.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation, and I agree with the vision, but I'm not quite sure it's hitting the vision. And I know you guys would know that I was going to say that. I love this vision that says, to be a part of the robust new downtown neighborhood located at Utah's most transit-rich gateway. And if we go to the slide that has the land use in urban form slide. That one, that's one.
I think
one
the
before
one
that.
before.
That one there. That's oh, you can go to one. Go back. Sorry.
2 back, yeah.
Next one. That one right there. I see this as a beautiful plan for this little block here. But if you look at a transit-rich neighborhood, there's a big wall there on the west, and there's no one going to be able to cross that wall. Yeah. So this transit-rich environment is about a 30-degree pizza. It doesn't go much past 4 south, and it doesn't go much past maybe 2 north or 2 south. And we're missing a great opportunity on everything west of the intermodal hub. So when we look at a HTRZ for the intermodal hub, we're not looking at it 360 degrees. We're looking at it really 180 degrees at the most. And I'm kind of disappointed that of all the discussions we've had recently, and even in the Transit's Connect SLC plan, they talk about the idea and the vision and of the connecting, right, reconnecting the east-west divide and the Rio Grande plan going down 500 South. I'm going to, of course, be a strong proponent of that, but I'm also just a strong proponent of eliminating that wall that we're going to be building here west of the intermodal hub. With the advent of the front runner double tracking, advent of Amtrak trains coming through here, advent of more Union Pacific trains coming through here, that divide and wall is going to grow. And though I love this vision of this one 30-acre, 2-block area, I feel that we're missing the opportunity to develop the access for people to get there from the other side of 600 West, and there's nothing that shows me that there's going to be any access for them to get here except by taking a car, which is limiting the cars is one of our vision statements in our quest here, and we're not going to be able to get here without going around the outskirts to get inside, and it's not going to be able to get there by bicycle or walk or anything else. And so though I like this portion of it, I think if we're firmly on this thing, I think we're missing the boat on other opportunities. And I don't want to discount other opportunities to make sure that we develop the west side of this location, because it can still work. And instead of going to the intermodal hub, it goes all the way out to 900 West instead of stopping there, because there's no crossing at that point. And the 200 South crossing would be pretty much, the gates would be closed 12 hours a day. And that's just my concern. So I appreciate it, but I think we need to make sure that we don't close the window on other great opportunities.
Beyond the the good comments from Board Member Dugan, I actually also agree that there is an interesting piece here, and I appreciate the name change for the namesake of the neighborhood, and what dreaming big is important, and it will, it's important for us to acknowledge that there are some big dreams out there, and potential things could happen. And I mean, obviously I'm talking about the Rio Grande plan, but I'm going to take a little step back beyond the issues or thoughts I have about the plan. And I love the dreams and how we want to activate this area and how we envision this area to be active and bringing people to the sidewalks. And I appreciate all of these aspects that the RDA is looking into. I want to understand how do we ended up with a district yet again when I was here in this chair when we talked about that certainly me felt it undermined the city as a whole when we are creating our own district in our greater conversation when we are talking to the state about districts and this pseudo privatization of our decision making and leaving the decision making from this board and delegating to a different board to decide. And it seems like we have rehashed this again. But correct me if I'm wrong, I see some changes into it. I'm still struggling with why that structure is the right structure to create here. Why do we need to go that direction to make this happen? And why wouldn't this board be able to accomplish these goals that you see here? Again, I want to separate those two things because I believe the greater goals are good and the things that you want to accomplish there are fantastic. I still struggle with this district and its creation and the delegation of our authority to a different group of unelected people to decide what happens in this big chunk of our city.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I'd love to. I touched on it a little bit, but whenever we did, I think it was September, whenever we had a check-in at an RDA board meeting with the consultants presented, and we heard your feedback and concerns about that very topic. While they were here in town, we did have a sit-down conversation and relayed that feedback and said, we really want to start with what we have now, like what can we accomplish under our existing structure of the RDA, with the RDA board as our legislative body, existing policies, procedures, all of that. So after that point, we actually had a series of meetings with our attorney, with Danny, Kara, leadership, everyone, and HRNA, who were the consultants working on this piece. And they really did a deep dive into everything RDA, existing policies, our organizational structure, to really wrap their heads around it. And that governance document is a reflection of how to make this happen within our existing structure. So I think we started out talking about a separate organizational entity because I think that that's something that's commonly done with these innovation districts, master plan developments. But to be honest, most of those are much larger in acreage than what we have here. We were kind of wrestling with, is that really necessary? So I think that our intent entirely, and hopefully that's represented in that document, is to start out kind of RDA business as usual. This is property planning, property disposition. The programming and activation is something we don't usually work into often, but we really want to rely on our partners and forming partnerships to help with that. But that really is our intent, and I think as the neighborhood grows and gets built out, we'll see how that evolves. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Mr. Chair, to answer your question, we're not looking to set up this as a separate district with a separate entity at this time. I think that was some of the early conversations as we were looking at how other innovation districts have been structured historically. When we took over this plan, we very much turned it more into an agency-focused development plan and utilizing that within the structure. And I think that's why within this plan you see, just as Ashley laid out with the governance, agency as per board direction, maintaining long-term ownership. Agency realized ground lease revenue of that. And what we talk about in terms of governance and framework is utilizing that lease revenue to continue to invest into the area in terms of being a possible maintenance source for the streets, being a possible source of funding for the ongoing programming. So that's the direction that the consultants have kind of taken in terms of this plan and the recommendations that are in it now, but we're not looking right now to set up a totally separate entity that would take that authority and decision-making away from the board right now.
Go ahead.
So I have two things. I don't want to leave this quite yet. I'm looking through my staff pack. Am I missing where we more thoroughly describe what this governance structure is, if it's different from the last one that we've wanted to deviate from? Because that to me feels like that's the first step for me. I don't want to move forward until we're sure. I've yet to see the governance structure that I like. Mm-hmm. I'm confident we are intelligent, insightful people who can find it, but I don't want to concede until we're sure we're there. So am I missing it in the staff packet, or is it something we've yet to be provided?
It's in the plan. There's a...
I'm looking at it right now. Can you guide me to where?
Sorry, I don't have it open, but I can find the page number for
If you want to do it after, that's fine, and I'll review it, but I might have skipped over that part,
okay.
But that to me feels like a really pivotal discussion before we agree to or concede. And mostly, this leads into my next concern, is that while the long-term vision and so much of what we're doing here are things that we agree with conceptually, it does feel like we inadvertently are backing ourselves into policy decisions before we get there and being painted into corners. And I know it's no one's intention, chickens and eggs and carts and horses, but in an effort to protect the legislative role that we have, one of my other concerns is if we want to include green space in this plan, I'm okay. I'm not okay connecting it to a larger concept that we haven't been presented with as a body that wasn't included in the $85 million GEO bond for parks that we have going on. So I'm not super comfortable saying that we're investing in a green loop until we've agreed that the green loop is a priority that needs to be funded and enacted. If we want to talk about green space here and retaining optionality for future, cool, I'm all for that. But I want to retain the optionality for eventually burying the trains and, you know, being able to expand and do other things too, right? That's a larger conversation about retaining optionality that doesn't bind future councils to policy decisions preemptively. I don't want us to do that as any part of this conversation.
Thank you. I want to, you know, I'm looking online, making sure that if any board member wants to say something, I'm not missing anybody. I'm trying to look through the documents in my phone, not the greatest screen for this sort of stuff. But I certainly I have. I'm very, you know, unclear about what the governance structure of this is and how different it is to the previous one that we, I believe, directed that we didn't like. So I'm feeling, I'm actually not conflicted whatsoever. I'm unsure, so I feel like this shouldn't be live, you know, immediately, because if the board that gets to decide these things is unclear, certainly the chair is of the RDA at the moment, and seems like I'm not the only one. I prefer that we get a little more clarity on what this governance structure is before we put this online. I hate to derail these plans, but I feel like it is a big policy point to make sure that we certainly if I was 100% clear about this being very different than what mentioned last year we didn't want to see, I would be in a different place right now, but I'm not. So I will prefer if this you know, took a little second, and I don't understand many pieces of this, so I think that will give us a little time to make sure that the board members and this board is clear about the governance structure and make sure that it lines up with our values and where we are right now. So that's where I stand right now. I hope I'm clear about that, and you know, that's my personal view. I'm one on this board. So if there anybody else has any other comments or thoughts, who said anything?
Mr. Chair?
Oh, board member.
Yes, I'm just wondering what the next steps are for this. Is this, I know that there's been some discussion about whether this is a master plan that needs to be adopted, and if the governance structure and the inclusion of the green loop are things that are not supported by board members, what would be our tools to make sure that it doesn't go out to RFP right away? Or I'm not exactly sure what the steps are, the legal steps are on this.
I can probably address that, but I would like to ask Katie if she would join, if in case I'm wrong. But it really does, and I regret that we didn't pick up on this before this last week. I think the first time a staff member raised it with RDA was April 1st, but we didn't follow up with RDA to say to them we really sincerely conclude that this is a plan that needs to be adopted by the legislative branch, because it does necessitate public financial investment. It concludes several policy concepts and decisions, probably necessitates ordinance changes. So these are all of the markings of what typically would be adopted by the Redevelopment Agency Board / City Council. So we have asked the Attorney's Office to prepare the proper legislative document for you to consider this, and that is not available or posted for today. So if you have things that you would like to change about it. It is your prerogative to do so, and you can do that in any level of detail that you want. You certainly can't violate separation of powers, but there is enough in this that is legislative that you could, if you wanted to, make substantial changes. So we would suggest that it be on a future RDA agenda, and that we go back through it and look at the various areas. One area, the governance framework, it does leave the door open for this to be pretty significant at a later date. And as it was explained, they talked about it starting out this way, or at this time, this is what it is. But the document would pave the way for that to be something much more than what you have expressed support for so far. So the other thing, though, since we didn't communicate clearly with RDA early enough, they have been planning to publish the plan and put out a press release today about it, so the public could perceive that it's already implemented. We asked them to specify that it is subject to approval and consideration by the board. But as of now, it sounds like you would like to have some more discussion about it, and you certainly can do that, and those would be the steps. Is it would come back for a discussion, and you could let RDA staff know, or us know in the meantime, of any kind of changes that you want. We could do that in revision format, and then you would have a formal chance to consider it. And Katie can correct me if I'm...
I agree with Cindy, and the next steps make a lot of sense.
And I guess, I will take ownership on not paying enough attention to this before and made it to the agenda. But I think we're going to get to the same, we want a vision for this area, and we share that together. But I want clarity that we're not doing, certainly I'm not voting for something that I disagree 100%. So thank you for that. I think this is where I stand right now. Any other comments? Oh, but Councilmember Warren, I'm so sorry. Councilmember Warren, go ahead.
No problem. So I'm feeling a little bit conflicted about this as well, because understanding the governance structure was really important to me, is really important to me. And I also want to preserve some of, our ability to make changes to the document, but I also really want to move forward. On this project, we've had so many discussions over the years, and different, as different players came in and out and having setbacks. But from what I've heard from so much of the business community that's interested, is that they're have been eagerly awaiting for this opportunity to come for a long time, so that we can start having these discussions and start moving forward on this. And I really don't want to cause further delay to that. So I like what Cindy's suggesting, and that would allow us to move forward today, if it still makes sense. I mean, I hate to have a press announcement that we're making a further plan on the thing that we've been planning for a long time. But if there's a way to put some of this information available out to the public today, and put it online today, and have a press release, and then still preserve on those few issues, I think that where we want to have a little bit more clarity, then that's what I would be in favor of.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I appreciate Board Member Wharton's comment, because we've been we've had this land for years, and I don't want to delay it anymore. And I don't know if it's possible, but if there's a way that we can move forward with the pieces that we all agree on. I mean, I don't hear any issues with things like the heights or the land uses or the street activation or the festival street. There's a lot of pieces in there that I feel like that I certainly agree with. I love the open space. I would love to figure out how to bury the rails. I don't know if that's in this plan or a separate plan, but it seems like all of those things can be like the pieces that would lead to a specific RFP and infrastructure are not the pieces that it seems like we are disagreeing on. It's the governance piece and then the open space and then what happens to the rails, understanding that we don't own the rails and things like that. But I wonder if some of the land use pieces, the heights, and the things that happen inside of those 2 blocks we can move forward on, because that would lead to the actual RFP for development, and we can continue to discuss the governance structure parts at future meetings, and some of the other big infrastructure pieces that council members have raised. I don't know if that's possible or not, but I'm not hearing that board members are opposed to those pieces that are happening on the inside of the block.
I think, and this is what I was trying to say, is the vision of the area, it seems right on. I'm not in conflict with the vision of the area. Certainly I have I think there is some thoughts in this board that I heard before when talking about this, about how this plugs into the green loop, and a little more details on that, and how this plugs or doesn't plug in with the Rio Grande, plan related to the rails. But those are pieces that there are questions about. But in general, we've been, very supportive of this, and we still that hasn't changed. The question I have, and I feel still very strongly about, is the governance structure. So if we can find a way to not delay the whole vision and process while still preserving that piece for clarity from this board. Certainly, and I don't say that this is happening, but I don't want to be in a situation where this goes out, even with the governance structure that I thought we were clear that was not going to happen, and maybe this is again not that, and then ends up being, and then I'm put in front of me a lot of votes related to funding, and for me it tarnishes the well, right? Like it poisons the well. It makes me, it turns me into. Not so much of a supporter of a project. And I don't think this is happening. I just want us to give us a little time to clarify this misunderstanding. And I hope that we can do that in between now and then. So I'm okay with that piece if we can find that common ground where we move ahead with the pieces that we agreed, the general visioning, but we preserve the governance structure for clarity to a later date. Board Member Petra.
No, and I want to say, right, like, I think I like the balance that we're striking here, which is to move forward, but to preserve the optionality to come back and iron out the details we don't like. But like, all of us are aware of the magnitude of all the decisions that are ahead of us. So thank you for being willing to allow us to discuss things here that ordinarily we might discuss in small groups, and for having patience with us. We get one bite at the apple for laying a road, for doing what we're going to do here. And so thank you for allowing us the time to process it, even if in less traditional formats from what we've done as our plates. I know there's a lot of discussion about how many hours we're spending here as council people and what the nature of our job is. Thank you for your patience and allowing us to make good decisions. I apologize if it's out of the norm, but I think this is the best due process to make sure that we are good stewards over our moment in this office, so that the future generations that will enjoy this spot have something that they can be proud of, that is malleable to their needs, that can become, an energy contributor to our vibrant home city. So thank you.
Board Member Mano.
I guess maybe it's I'll ask a more specific question to Ashley or RDA staff. Is it possible for the RFP to move forward without the exact governance structure being approved, or is there something fundamental about the governance structure that must be in place before you put out an RFP?
Go ahead, Ashley.
Well, I just wanted to say, I mean, I think the governance piece was I think we thought we were being forward thinking. It's kind of almost like a business plan for this project we're taking on before it gets, huge and out of our hands. I think it was our attempt to be, forward thinking and plan about the resources that may be needed in the future. I mean, if this is the one thing holding up, this plan, I would say, I honestly think we could take it out it's not, it really is, the intent is to start out this project at least under RDA, like what I said, RDA business as usual, current policies, procedures, everything that we do now. I think that we could take it out if this is the one piece that is causing.
And I think the context from this chair's context is very important to this conversation, and it might not. Maybe there is recent extra trauma on similar structures, maybe even forward-thinking structures on governance structures that the state thinks they're more efficient and faster to deal with. That ultimately we disagree and I felt very strongly about it last year, and I feel even more stronger today, especially because of what happened in February, right? And so it is a key piece to this, but ultimately, Board Member Mano and Wharton board members are correct that we want to see this moving forward, and we've been talking about the need and the energy, and we've been talking about specific things that could happen and dreaming big in there, and we have not disagreed on those. But the governance structure to me is something that I need clarity, and I need that to be, I need to make sure that it's not what I don't want it to be. And that's where that's really the only place that I struggle with at the moment. Any other? Okay. Seems like I don't see any hands up or texts. Thank you. Oh, Board Member Wharton.
So do we need to take a straw poll today? Do we need to make a vote so that, if so, if the staff's waiting? Yeah, well, can I get an answer from staff on that?
I'm happy to answer that unless there's any follow-ups to that. I think that'd be great if we could at least get a straw poll, and if that straw poll indicates that, you would like to remove the governance structure part from the plan so that we can at least move forward with the other parts, as Board of Directors have mentioned. I think we can circle back and have a deeper conversation on what the intention is within the plan on the governance. I think you'll find that what we're proposing right now, or what's being recommended, is exactly what we all want it to be, and not a structure that you're opposed to. So if we could at least get a straw poll of support, that'd be great. That allows us to at least continue to speak to the plan and release it to the public with that caveat, and then continue to work with the City Attorney's Office and you as directors on how we move this forward as far as either approval or how to amend that portion.
I need a point of clarification for that. Removal of the governance structure, I'm fine with. Would that preclude some sort of advisory structure, especially for the businesses that would be there, that the door would still be open to have an advisory group or something?
Yeah, I think that would be there, and I think obviously our intention would be to continue to move forward with pushing the project forward and working towards an RFP, and it would clearly be our intention to have this conversation resolved before we got into any detailed conversations on that, so that we had that certainty.
I just don't want to throw babies out with bathwater with that.
No.
So, Mr. Chair, I move that or I would suggest a straw poll that we direct staff to move forward and publish this plan with everything but the governance structure. And then I think that is really the key that is the main concern for everybody. And I think the other issues that we've talked about that might be points of concern for some council or for some board members can be addressed through that issue.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I am just asking for clarification so that Danny and I aren't trying to bop each other on the head later. Under your proposal, Board Member Wharton, would you anticipate that the council would have a formal vote, some adoption of a legislative document at a later date? Yes. Okay. And then the next question is, would the board members be free to make the kinds of, or to have the kinds of discussions or potentially make the kinds of changes that were raised by Board Member Dan Dugan and by Board Member Victoria Petro?
Yeah, I don't want to preclude those.
Okay.
Conversations.
Okay. That I just wanted to clarify. So I think that I understand how we could. I think we could accomplish that. Don't you, Danny?
Yes, I think those are conversations we'd look forward to having.
Everybody's clear on the. Okay, so everybody needs to show their feelings right now. Okay, it's unanimous as is right now. So thank you, Board Member Wharton, for that motion. Very straightforward and easy motion you made. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We are moving around back again to item B1. We wanted to make sure that we were at the right time for the public hearing. So we're moving to item B1, the resolution, RDA budget amendment number 2 for fiscal year 2023-2024. The same rules of the quorum apply to this item, and our goal is to create and keep a safe space for everyone to share and participate in the meeting. So please follow our public comment rules when making your remarks. Disruptions, threats to anyone's safety are not allowed. Before we begin taking comments, I will first turn the time over to Ben Dutke, who's online, council staff policy analyst, to give us a short introduction. Go ahead, Ben.
This amendment is budget neutral. It would reappropriate funding for several projects in the Depot District. The total amount of funding, $12.1 million, would stay the same, but it would be split up differently into larger appropriations. The two appropriations are $8.1 million for property disposition and site work in the Rio Grande District, and $4 million for Depot District infrastructure development. The amendment also makes changes to align with the city's new Workday financial system structure. So there would be additional labels to better identify the fiscal year when the board approved the appropriation, and it would improve tracking about where funds are spent. This would also help with the RDA's compliance and reporting requirements. After the public hearing, today's agenda has a short follow-up briefing in case board members have any follow-up questions and the potential adoption of the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Since this is a public hearing, we're going to start right now with comments on this item. Taylor, please start with the first public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do not have anyone registered to speak to this item.
Okay. Is there anybody here present that wants to speak to this budget amendment? I am not seeing any. We're gonna close the public hearing. Action will be taken in our next RDA business, item C4. So now we are at item C4. So that shuffling of agenda items made it somehow convenient. So we're moving now to item C4, which is the resolution for the RDA budget amendment number 2 for fiscal year 2023. We have still Ben Lucky, Danny Waltz at the table, and any questions from the board? Any thoughts? Okay. I believe that we can have a motion. Is there one to be made?
Is it just move for approval? Is that sufficient?
I think that's it. That will suffice. So we have a motion on the table. You asked me if that was a motion.
Is that an acceptable motion? Move for approval.
Motion by Board Member Petro and a second, I believe, by Board Member Wharton. Any discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, I am going to call the questions. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any, it seems like there's no opposed. Everybody, it was a unanimous motion, so this motion carried. Thank you. We are moving on the agenda to item 5, resolution RDA budget amendment number 3 for fiscal year 2023-2024. We're going to receive a briefing on this by Ben Lutke, Council Policy Analyst, Danny at the table still, and anybody else that will join. Ben, your time.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This Budget Amendment 3 is similar to Budget Amendment 2 that you just adopted in the sense that it is also budget neutral. It would provide a total of $4.25 million for property acquisition in the North Temple project area. The property is envisioned as being redeveloped as small-scale commercial. This could also include space for nonprofits and potentially residential housing units above. There are 4 funding sources for the $4.25 million. First is $1.7 million that the board previously appropriated for strategic interventions in the North Temple area. Those strategic intervention funds were intentionally left flexible so that the RDA could respond to opportunities as they arise, including property acquisitions as one option. The second funding source is $1.6 million from the Program Income Fund, sometimes called PIF. These are the most flexible dollars that the RDA has. They can be spent in any project area for any redevelopment use. The $1.6 million from Program Income Fund were originally appropriated into a holding account, pending the development of a commercial assistance program. The administration is working on commercial assistance programs across multiple departments, and that proposal will come to the council in the future. The third funding source is $326,000 from a North Temple project area holding account that was also for commercial assistance, but specific to the North Temple area. That holding account would have a remaining balance of $217,000 after this budget amendment. So there would still be some funding there, and additional funding could be added in future budget openings. The fourth and last funding source is $603,000 from a 9-line housing property acquisition account in the Program Income Fund. As I mentioned earlier, the Program Income Fund, the most flexible dollars that the RDA has. That $4 million was for property acquisition in the 9-line, specifically for housing development, but negotiations since the appropriation have concluded that the $4 million is not fully needed which freed up the $603,000 proposed today. In summary, the budget amendment provides $4.25 million to acquire property in the North Temple project area. This is from strategic intervention funds in North Temple. That's $1.7 million. 2 different holding accounts for commercial assistance programs that total $1.9 million, since those programs are still in development, and the $603,000 from the 9-Line project area housing acquisition fund, where negotiations concluded that less funding is needed than originally thought. The public hearing and the potential adoption vote are both scheduled for May 14th. And that's everything for my overview.
Thank you, Ben. Board Chair Pui has stepped out for a moment, so we will move to Danny to present this, I believe, right?
Ben has done an excellent job of laying it out. We have nothing to add or clarify on that, so I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Council or board members, any questions for Danny or Ben?
Are you responsible for the chart on slide number 2? Because it's remarkable. Thank you.
Is that the teal and yellow one?
With lots of arrows?
No, that is our financial analyst, Aaron Cunningham, who does an amazing job of laying out the changes. So
it's amazing.
Thank you.
Board members, any additional questions? All right, so this item will be, I believe, on for public hearing at our next meeting.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken. So for now, we'll move on to item number 5 of section C, which is renaming of the Redevelopment Agency of Salt Lake City. We have...
That would be me.
Danny again.
And I believe we have some slides
no staff introduction
to go with this, if that's possible to pull those up. We decided we would add on to the fun of not just renaming Station Center for you, but to double down on really going all in. Thank you. This proposal is essentially, as it's stated, is a consideration of changing the name of the Redevelopment Agency of Salt Lake City. If you could go to the next slide, please. First question I'm sure you all have is, why would we be considering this and why would we be doing that now? There are 3 factors that have gone into why we're bringing this to the board at this time. The RDA was originally established back in 1969. We were charged at that time to revitalize Salt Lake City through economic development and investment. Over the past 54 years, obviously our strategies and vision and mission have evolved as the city around us has had changing needs. And in short, we feel that this is a good time to come before you as a board and consider changing the name of the agency to reflect what those new missions and values are moving forward. So 3 factors, as I said, went into it. The first is a change to Utah State Code, which governs the area of the agencies. Also the guiding framework, mission statement and values that you as a board have approved, and the programs and policies that we've adopted and updated over the past few years. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, section title 17C of the state code is what essentially establishes and governs redevelopment agencies. Back in 2016, the state legislature changed this section of the code and changed the name of what was originally known as community development and renewal agencies and redevelopment agencies in different areas of the code, and changed all of that to agencies being called community reinvestment agencies. This was done at a time of when the type of project areas and the process to create it was changed. And so in association with that, they changed the name of the agency so that any agencies created from that point forward would be known as community reinvestment agencies, and any that existed at that time or before could change their name if they wanted to. Next slide. Shortly after this change to the legislation, we as an agency, working in conjunction with you as a board, updated our mission statement to start reflecting kind of a more current present day view of the priorities and objectives of the agency. That mission statement had been in place since the 80s and obviously was outdated, had some references that we preferred not to use anymore, i.e. the word blight, and things that were pulled directly from the state code. So it definitely was in need of updating. Along with that updated mission statement, you as a board also approved a set of core values for the agency to abide by, which really laid out our intended economic, social, and physical outcomes of what we wanted to see in our projects. And then also included within those values were a set of 20 livability benchmarks, which is what we have used since then to somewhat measure and define what are the public benefits that we would like to see in projects. So this was approved by the board initially in 2019. An amended version was approved in 2021, and this is what we've been working off of since then. Next slide, please. In addition to the mission and values, that started going into what we started doing as far as adopting our programs, updating policies, and all of this was in a way for us as an agency to really start prioritizing how we wanted to incorporate public benefits in the projects we did and how to measure that for what we felt was a good participation level and doing projects that were more community serving. So obviously one of our biggest ones is the Housing Development Loan Program, part of which you acted on earlier today with the housing funding strategies. We've updated our real disposition property policy, our art policy. We've established a sustainability policy. All of this is within the context of what that guiding framework was and trying to have a more equitable, inclusive approach to what we do within the community. Next slide. So again, back to the question of why now. This felt like a good time between what the changes were to the legislation a few years ago, where we're at in terms of our mission and values, as well as our programs and policies. I'll say at this point that this is something that we've considered for a number of years, obviously since the time that the legislation was changed. When we were setting out with our mission statement and our values, it was something we thought about at that time of should we look at an overall rebranding of the RDA to align. We didn't want to do it at that time, simply put, because we wanted to be first intentional in leading out with the activities of the agency and our mission versus what would just feel like changing our name for the sake of changing our name and then do the work. So we wanted to lead out with having that mission, establishing our values. Now, after a couple of years of the programs and policies we've done, we felt like this is now the right time to reflect what we have been working on versus just have it feel like we're just doing it for the sake of doing it. Next slide. This is just a simple mock-up, but the idea is essentially to change the name of the redevelopment agency to the Salt Lake City Community Reinvestment Agency. I will tell you, much like Station Center, we went through a pretty exhaustive approach here of throwing names on the wall that we might want to do. We got creative with some of those just didn't feel genuine, and so at the end of the day we felt that the best approach was just to be straightforward with not just what the legislation is, but the community reinvestment part of what the name is really reflects what we feel we've laid out with the mission and values and the livability benchmarks. So that is the proposal. There is nothing requiring us to do it. There is nothing necessarily time-wise that we have to do this within, but it's a conversation we wanted to bring before you as a board, as I said, because it just felt like it's the right time to start looking at how we can change that name and be more reflective of what we're working towards and what our priorities are. So I'll stop at that point and answer any questions.
Thanks, Danny. Board members? Board member Dugan gives a thumbs up. I actually, is there anyone online that, Chris, board member Wharton, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm in favor of this for bringing it in alignment with state law, but also because I do think it communicates more what the objectives of the agency are. And I think like the Rio Grand District renaming, it's long overdue. So I'm in favor of it.
Thanks, board member Wharton. I want to make a comment as well. When I first heard about this, I was like, oh man, that sounds like a pain to change everything. But the more I think about it, this is actually really, really important to me. If we think about the history of urban renewal efforts throughout the country, including our own city, it has actually a quite racist and really terrible past. And so looking at this agency not as redoing something that was wrong, but actually reinvesting in something that's already great. A neighborhood that already has inherent strengths, I think is really important. So I'm supportive of this, and I think we move forward as quickly as is practicable. Danny, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. One other thing I wanted to add, that as part of the resolution and the request for approval, it would also change the name of our advisory committee. This one we didn't spend as much time thinking about. We went from the Redevelopment Advisory Committee to the Reinvestment Advisory Committee simply because we didn't want to change the acronym. But that is included within the packet, so I wanted to highlight that as well. I figured you'd like that, Mr. Chair.
Yes, that was my first committee. The design instructor in me wants to just make a comment about the logo.
It's just a rough mock-up. Okay?
Can we get a professional to align the letters and make sure the radius of Community Reinvestment Agency matches the radius of the circle? General concept, fine, but there's just a couple things that are driving me insane. But I'm sure you'll fix those before you print it on stuff, right?
We'll work on that.
All right. If there yep. Board Member Dugan.
I'll just make a motion.
Yes.
I move that we adopt the resolution renaming the Redevelopment Agency of Salt Lake City to the Salt Lake City Community Reinvestment Agency.
Second.
Any discussion to this motion? Okay, we have a motion from Board Member Dugan and a second from Board Member Lopez Chavez. I will call the question. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That passes unanimously with Board Chair Pui absent. Okay, that moves us on to item number 7, which is an informational update on the Gallivan Center's 20-year plaza plan. At the table we have Danny Waltz, Lucas Goodrich, and then consultants from GSBS Architects, Jesse Allen and Erica Chmielewski. I'm so sorry. Please correct me.
I get nervous about saying her name as well.
Chmielewski.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Gallivan Center is owned and operated by the Redevelopment Agency. Nestled in the heart of downtown, this 3.5-acre plaza is home to an ice skating rink that welcomes hundreds of thousands of visitors each year, an outdoor amphitheater that's currently home to our Twilight concert series by our Salt Lake City Arts Council, various free, all ages, and low barrier, no barrier activities that are open to the public, and countless other activities. Our city is changing, our city is growing, and to meet those growth needs and changes head on and proactively, the Redevelopment Agency put out an RFP through a public competitive process to engage a consultant to help us envision the next 20 years of plaza activities. That chosen consultant was GSBS Architects, who are at the table with me today, and their sub-consultants. We've been hard at work with them over the last 8 months, and we're excited to share some information with you here today and use this opportunity as a check-in on the plaza plan and our activities over the last 8 months. So Jesse and Erica, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. I first want to say what an honor and a pleasure it is to work with the RDA and Gallivan staff on this project. It's really been a wonderful experience. 30 years ago, the vision of the Gallivan Plaza was to become something that brings people into downtown Salt Lake. That has been achieved. Salt Lake City and the downtown fabric has changed a lot over the past 30 years, and it's time that we look back at the plaza and the framework that makes this plaza a great place to be and see what different priorities arise based on how downtown has changed, patterns in human behavior has affected how we use space, and the effect an increased population will have on our downtown. Next slide, please. Deciding on the Gallivan's vision and identity set the stage for management and physical changes to the plaza. As we were looking at the plaza, we saw it contains many different components. These components include programming, art, vegetation, events, and physical spaces within the plaza. With our changes, we also introduced many new components as well. While these components may look like just individual elements, they work together to form a picture of what a great downtown space should be. It is because of this we chose Mosaic of the Arts to embody the vision of the Gallivan Plaza moving forward. We also created design guideposts that instill pillars any changes to the to. These include, next slide please. Center stage, as a move away from the living room moniker that has been used to describe the Gallivan Plaza in the past. Center stage emphasizes the prominence of events through programming and other events held at the Gallivan, and cements the plaza as a downtown focal point through its offerings. Next slide. We tend to look at space from 3 or 4 sides. There's 2 sides that enclose the space as well as the ground. 6-sided activation focuses on looking at the Gallivan like a cube and making sure that the activation is taking place on each edge of the plaza, including the ground and the air above you. The Gallivan Plaza also has exceptional programming in the winter with lights, ice rink, and temporary art exhibits. We want to ensure that there is that level of effort and activation throughout all seasons. Next slide, please. The Gallivan Plaza is surrounded by downtown, the cultural hub of the city, and it needs to be unique and different. This design guidepost focuses on distinguishing the Gallivan from other cultural institutions, public spaces, and park spaces by its programming, art, ambiance, and design of physical space. Next slide. Third place is a term that speaks to the need to have social interactions outside the 2 places that you spend most of your time. The first is your home, the second is where you work, and the third being a place that fosters a sense of community and allows for social cohesion that is one of the most important reasons why public space exists today. Next slide, please. Using these guideposts as pillars to check design and management suggestions against, we created a concept for the plaza that addresses what is needed to achieve the vision and current stakeholder concerns and desires. Next slide. The first big move we are making is flipping the amenity-rich areas with the circulation areas. Currently, the activation is in the center of the plaza with circulation zones around the edges. When we flip these, it allows for a very flexible central space for more people to do events and other programming options in the Gallivan more comfortably. This also allows for a better emphasis on amenities that are not staffed and always open to the public on the edges, which in turn allows for better wayfinding as well. Next slide. In addition to food and beverage, addition of food and beverage as anchors is critical to the longevity and financial prosperity of the plaza. It is preferred that there really be 2 bars or restaurants in the plaza that bring people in and have them stay for a while. Food and beverage is also a wonderful activator for the ground floor of these buildings that surround the plaza. Next slide. With the increase in population coming to downtown, balancing spaces and amenities where people can come every day versus reserving areas for big events was a key consideration in the design. Renting out the plaza for events is also a huge component to your financial security. Currently, bigger events close down the entirety of the plaza. We want to make sure that at least a portion of the plaza is always accessible. This restructuring we did a few moves ago allows for a portion of the plaza to remain open while the other half of the plaza can be closed for rentals. And you see that on that purple area in the diagram. Next slide. We also compiled a list of big moves that weren't necessarily design specific. These include tactics to expand your profits and address other components that make your space work better for you. We also want to build upon the Gallivan staff with adding more marketing personnel, a fundraising director, and additional programming staff to allow for activations of the Gallivan Plaza to become on par with top-tier public spaces around the country. Next slide. And one more. Thank you. So when we look at these big moves working together in a 3D setting, we see how these activations would look like in the summer. Adding programming centered around the users of downtown, the workspaces for the office workers, playgrounds for the families, food and beverage for really everyone, allow there to be something special in the space for everyone, regardless of what programming is going on in. Next slide. In the wintertime, we also see additional activations happening. The ice rink is starting to transition to the end of its life and is in need of replacement at some point. This allows us to expand and relocate the ice rink to a standard NHL size that allows us to have increased programming that's not just free skate. We also see temporary winter structures and pop-up markets that bring some additional programming and funding during those winter months. Next slide. Unfortunately, our time today is very brief, but our plan also covers a myriad of other topics, from background and history of the plaza to existing conditions to in-depth summaries on demographics and stakeholder engagement, to concepts, and finally to how we're going to implement these concepts. Questions can be asked on anything we showed today or any of these topics listed in this 13 topics. Thank you.
Board members, any thoughts, any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks. Appreciate the design here, and I love the vision you have here. My only concern, I think, when I read through the slide package, there was a talk about removing some of the trees, and I'm really concerned about, when we go downtown Salt Lake City, the heat effect of a big open space with no trees there. And when I look at this one summer activation, I look at the area to the east, the lunch area, and I'm like, I don't see any trees over there, and I'd rather have a tree than an umbrella. I'm really concerned about the heat of that concrete coming up. But I love the idea of the whole, the larger ice rink in the wintertime. That's kind of cool. Some ideas there. So, but otherwise, it's pretty. Thank you.
Remember, Petra?
So as I'm excited about this, I think it's well warranted in time. I've been concerned with the number of events that we don't host there because they grow and we lose. And I think this governance structure is actually one that gives me pause on other projects that we've been talking about, because it was clearly conceived at a time when the 18-hour city wasn't a possibility. And so things having to be chased out because a concert during the summer might be loud past 10 p.m. does not feel congruent with other aims that we now have as a city that is maturing and becoming more in accordance. So while like all of the physical things I'm fine with, I can get on board with Councilmember Dugan and the heat island issue. I hadn't thought of that. I am worried about, maybe not worried, I am wanting us to be conscientious about the other things we need to do. I've even heard rumors that Twilight might not be tenable. And I have to tell you, it kind of scratched my head when like a city activity can't be hosted in a city-owned facility for city constituents. Like my brain wants to explode as I think of that. So just as we're moving forward with these kinds of renovations, I want us to be renovating the rest of the structures around it to make sure that it can actually be a center stage, because it does feel a little bit like a living room, like we're going to turn the lights down and lay on the couch and watch TV quietly after certain hours, instead of being a stage where like we can all applaud and get excited about stuff.
Thank you. The only thought I have, I'm excited to see a revamp of of Gallivan, and I'm excited to see some new amenities there. I certainly, hopefully, some of our goals aim towards more activation and more events coming in, and so whatever we can do to make this space more attractive to those, so we can cash flow some of these events. The only thing I'm hoping that this is included in the project is every time that there is a paid event, all of this temporary fencing comes up that is not great, and then because it's in the middle of the block, so there is entrances in almost all sides. I think in all sides, or maybe I'm missing one. No, but and then there is problems with that when you have a paid event. So I wonder with some of these improvements we can think forward about that, piece. So when we need to close it out and make sure, so it's not like a lot of temporary fencing coming up online, which include, it costs a lot of money for events too, to rent all of this. And I don't know, maybe you already thought about this, most likely you did, but this is one of the only things I wish to see on this. And I saw the governance structure in there, and I twitched a little bit, and hopefully you didn't. Thank you for allowing for this presentation. Board member.
I wanted to ask Danny, the crosswalk section on 300 South, right across from the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is included in this, but I'd love to see some thought given into how to expand access. It's currently not walkable. There's lots of construction happening, but I think as we see an increase in events and diversity of people, I've seen lots of people try to access it and pedestrians, and it's not easy to access. So I'd love to see that included in this. But, I just pulled up an events calendar, and I think we might all go bachata dancing this evening after city council. So pretty cool that we're expanding lots of different cultural events there.
Could I add yet another thought I have? Many people complain about the lack of parking in downtown, which is not true. There is plenty of parking, and certainly we have a parking facility that is right there under this that potentially is underutilized many times, but many people don't know it exists. And I would like to know if there is interest or there is a possibility to include that technology that allows drivers to know that there is X amount of parking spots available. The airport uses it, but it certainly is very common now in major parking structures. But that allows any driver in the vicinity to know, oh, there's 300 spots right there, and I can go to level whatever, and there is 80 spots. So that to me will make it more attractive to the community as a whole, and highlighting the use of that parking that we already have there. But I don't know how much those things cost. It seems like a fun toy, but it seems like it could be useful. But that's the only thing I have. Anybody else? Thank you. Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
There's no action needed on this item. We are moving on to item 8. Another informational item, Sure House RDA. Thank you for keeping us on track, Board Member Mano. I don't know what you did, but you keep us on time. Item number 8, informational Sure House RDA properties and S-Line streetcar expansion updates. At the table, Tracy Tran, Senior RDA Project Manager, John Larson maybe joining us at some point, Lynn Jacobs, Transportation Engineer, and Marcus Bennett, UTA Project Manager. Your time.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so we're here with our friends from Transportation and UTA to give an update on the S-Line extension, and then I'll dive into a little bit about the RDA property impacts. So I'm going to turn it over to Lynn.
Thank you, Tracy. So this is the S-Line extension in Sugar House. As many of you may be aware, a number of years ago, the state legislature allocated $12 million to UTA to extend the streetcar about a block. We're looking at about a 900-foot extension, so it's about a block that we're looking at doing. And we right away started working closely with UTA to look at different alternatives. We looked at and evaluated several ideas that have been kicked around over the years in terms of where the S-Lane should go, and together we settled in on this route that kind of follows Simpson Avenue. I think the next slide will actually show that, and we all worked together to figure that out. The goal of this extension is really just to help improve visibility of the S-Line. As many of you know, it never really was intended to end where it currently ends. There was always an intent to carry it further into Sugar House. And this fortunately gave us an opportunity to take it about one more block into Sugar House. I think we always like to refer to this project as putting the head on the body, because that's really what this is about, is just making it more visible and getting another block extension and then setting us up for the future. And so with that, maybe Marcus, if you want to share what the project looks like.
Yes, so what we're seeing here is the existing condition with the current end of line on the upper left of the figure with the Fairmont station. And if we toggle to the next screen here, it will show that 900-foot extension along Simpson Avenue. Just a few details here. There'll be a fully signalized intersection at McClelland and Sugarmont, and a at-grade crossing of the streetcar. As it continues down Simpson Avenue, there will not be vehicular crossings at Sugarmont. And the S-line extends onto both Simpson Avenue and onto the existing RDA development property there. And there'll be a pedestrian crossing at 1300 East and a new station at Highland Drive, which would be the new end of line. We can go to the next slide here. In addition to that extension, there'll also be additional double tracking. So a few years ago, existing double track was installed between 300 East and 500 East. It's about 2,000 feet of double tracking. If we toggle to the next slide, we'll be adding another 1,400 feet of double tracking between 500 East and 700 East. This will provide additional flexibility. But when that past double tracking was implemented, we were able to go to the 15-minute frequency that the S-line currently operates on. And by doing this additional double tracking, it will allow us to maintain those headways at 15 minutes with the extension to Highland Drive. Go to the next slide. So our schedule on the delivery of this, in the coming days we'll be releasing an RFP for design and construction of the extension and the double tracking. We hope to be in construction later in the summer this year, and we expect construction to last through the beginning of 2026 and be prepared for operation in early 2026. On the next slide here, it's for the public, the information from our communications team on how the public can stay in touch with the project. And you know, if we go back a few slides here, and you see the property where it's located, that's been a collaboration between the city and the art. And it's collaboration like that that allows projects like this to move forward. The contributions that we are looking at facilitating, and that Lynn and Tam, or Tracy, I apologize. Mm-hmm. Lynn and Tracy will be talking more about are critical for us to be able to move forward here.
Along this image, you'll see that there's kind of a hashed out area that's on the southern part of the project. That's actually just a preservation for future double track if it's ever needed. And so we're kind of preserving that space in case we ever need to come in, and as the S-line gets further extended, if it needs to have double tracking in this area, there's room to do it. If you want to go to the slide after the, I think it's the next slide after this, great. So obviously this requires a lot of shifting of property out there to make this happen. As we worked with our city surveyor, Chris Donahue, and others, we discovered that there's a lot of very messy property descriptions in this area, and legal descriptions are very convoluted. We hired a title company, and we've done a lot of homework between us, Chris, and a separate surveyor that UTA has hired to sort that all out. And basically what we're looking to do is there's a portion of the S-line that's going to go within city right-of-way. That's that blue hash area that you see kind of on the southern part of this. The area that's just above that, there's a little bit of a red area. That's actually RDA property right now. And what we're looking to do is create a subdivision plat that dedicates that red area and the green area just north of it as public right-of-way, and allows us to then lease that property to UTA to run the S-line on. The little orange hashed area that you see up by Sugarmont Apartments is property that the city acquired back when Sugarmont Apartments was developed. So we actually already own that property. So basically we're transferring some of the RDA property out to public right-of-way to make this happen. And then Sugarmont Drive will no longer function as a roadway because we don't want to have any vehicular conflicts with the S-line where it crosses. And so Sugarmont Drive will be closed to vehicle traffic, we will maintain Parley's Trail in that area. So as many of you are aware, there's a little strip of concrete that's by Sugarmont Apartments. The Highland Drive project is actually extending that trail all the way to Highland Drive as part of its scope. And then that will be retained as public access. And then the asphalt in Sugarmont Drive, that property, we're anticipating giving that to the RDA to offset the impacts we're creating on the south side of their property. It doesn't quite make the RDA whole, but this concept is a lot less impactful than all the previous alternatives that we looked at in terms of extending the S-line and what it did to this property in terms of making it viable and something that could actually be developed and turn into something useful. So that's a lot. There's a lot of moving parts. We are working on a subdivision plat that will basically pull all that off in one fell swoop, and working that through our planning division right now. The surveyor that UTA has hired is developing that. They're about a week and a half to 2 weeks out from delivering a draft of that for us to submit for that application. One of the really interesting nuances of this is that Sugarmont Drive was never actually dedicated as public right-of-way. It's just a property that the city owns. And so we have the ability to just transfer it to the RDA. As we did our title search, we never found any evidence that it's ever been dedicated. So it's been an interesting journey to get to this point, to say the least. So that's an overview of the property impacts. I don't know if there are any questions or if we want to hold that for the end of the presentation.
I believe that there is some questions. Board member Young had some comments.
Go ahead, board member.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to address two key issues that we've heard from a lot of the constituents in District 7 because they're really addressed here. So first and foremost is that the current termination in McClelland on Sugarmont was never really the intention for the grand vision of the streetcar, and that by getting it to this property up along Highland where there's more access to the business community really sets us up for other opportunities in the future. So we're taking like a small step now with the opportunity then that opens up for the future. Would that be accurate, Lynn?
Yes, that is perfectly stated.
Okay, excellent. So I like to double check that. And then I think the other key piece is that so Sugarmont Drive itself is right now it's a one-way road, and really there's also, the road that then comes in off of Highland by the bank and everything like that as well. So the loss of Sugarmont Drive isn't really impacting any sort of traffic flow of significance within this area. At least that's just been my experience. I just wanted to confirm that with our transportation experts.
That is absolutely correct. And I would also mention that Sugarmont Drive's closure is identified in almost every city master plan that I've been able to review. It's in the Sugar House master plan, it's in the transportation master plan, it's in the streetcar extension plan. So it's been long planned that we would close this roadway, and it's been in literally every plan. John, would you like to add to that?
Right, but and I think it's worth noting that the Parley's Trail / S-Line Trail connection will be preserved and enhanced.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. I don't have any other questions at this time. I'm excited to hear the next part of the presentation.
Quick thought there. This is where those beautiful planters, well, I'm being facetious now. We put, the city, I believe the city might have put some planters in that street, right? Like these gigantic metal planters. So, okay, so we were trying already for years since the S-line opened up to deviate traffic from that area if there was not a lot of it. And I remember many years ago attending some neighborhood festivals that were trying to bring some life to some of these properties organized by some of the community there. So this street will not be a through street anymore, or this street that technically wasn't meant to be a through street is not going to be one anymore. Okay, that clarifies. And and I might have missed this part of the presentation, but there's a new station at the end, what you call the head of the S line. Okay.
Yeah,
So
the little dashed area in red that you see
those
off
rectangles.
off to the right-hand side, that is the new station.
And you're putting 2 of those just in each side?
There'll be
Go ahead, Marcus.
There'll be a single platform in the initial construction, but space preservation for an additional platform in the future.
Or a second one. Okay, I see. And okay, I'm gonna leave my questions to that at the moment. Is anybody else? Okay, I leave you to the presentation.
Well, then at this point, I'll turn it over to Tracy to talk about the RDA's project.
All right, great. Thanks, Lynn. And then next slide, please.
Sorry.
Member Dugan?
Sorry, back to the Sugarmont. Is that are you gonna like make it a festival street so there won't be any curb, or is that some ideas there so it's not like a curb?
The intent is to actually let the RDA develop where that street is right now so that you'll have the development come up right to the trail. And that actually
right to the trail, so the north side of Sugarmont.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's exactly
So
what
that'll really activate that space with development instead of this big chunk of asphalt that's just out there. Yeah.
Good. Any thoughts? Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask quickly, and I was discussing this with my colleague, if there's going to be any investment, and I mean, this is a great area for biking. It's one of my favorite paths, and just making sure that as we cross over from Highland into Simpson and the other adjacent streets, to make sure that we're investing in those crosswalks. I see lots of families, strollers waiting at these intersections, and it's such a wide street to cross over. So even though not quite the S-line, just thinking about how we can better promote access to the S-line.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, with the Highland Drive reconstruction, we actually narrowed the road and made those areas wider, especially on the west side of the road, where we've provided a big wide shared use path that runs north and south down Highland Drive. That will connect to the Parley's Trail. It'll also connect the green area you see on your map as a sidewalk that will run on the south side of the RDA property. And then we've even provided a crosswalk from basically the RDA property over to Fairmount Park, with the idea that as people are living in this development, they'll want to go to the park, and we want to give them a safe place to do that. And so, yeah, absolutely. Pedestrians and cyclists were thought of heavily as we develop these ideas.
Okay, I think this might be it. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Next slide. So as you can tell, there's just a lot of moving parts to this. And then, so now I'm going to talk about the RDA properties that we own. So on the left side of the screen, you can see highlighted in yellow, those are the properties that the RDA owns. So towards the left, or on the west side, that's the former Sugar House Fire Station site. And then on the right side is the former Sugar House DI building. And in between those two, there's a current public services maintenance facility that is being used right in between those properties, and we have been coordinating with them as part of all of this. And then just some pictures of those buildings on the right side. Next slide. So as we move towards building the S-line and extending the S-line, there's a lot of little things that we'll also have to do, not a lot of little things, but a lot of things that we'll have to do within our property. So the first is the demolition of the buildings. So all the buildings will need to be demoed. Since the S-line will move within the RDA property, those buildings will have to be demolished before the S-line can come in and extend, and before construction can start. And as mentioned in the previous slide, the public services, the maintenance facility is currently located on site, and we have been talking with them in the last 2-3 years. They are aware that they will need to move. That public services facility does serve the Sugar House Business District, and provides a lot of the maintenance in the along the S-line. And then we will also need to reroute the utilities. There's currently some existing utility easements within the property, and those would need to be rerouted before we can work on the redevelopment of the site and extend the S-line. A couple other things as we move towards the development of the site, UTA has requested like a restroom and a break room to be considered in the new development, so that's something we'll factor in as we work towards the RFP. As we're preparing the properties for redevelopment through the RFP, the focus will be on some sort of affordable housing. It will be some sort of mixed use because we will need to have ground floor commercial space along Highland. But the overall goal will be affordable housing. And the last point is the RDA staff may return at an upcoming board meeting to discuss any actions needed to comply with the RDA's real disposition policy. So as we're exchanging properties and giving some properties up for the S-line extension, we'll want to make sure we're following our policy and returning with what we need to. And with that, we're open to any more questions. Happy to answer anything.
On this yellow shape, there is, the line, if I remember right, trims on top of some of those, the utilities maintenance building and the old firehouse, right? Correct. So we lose a little bit of that shape in that side, and maybe a little bit on the south side of Simpson. Correct. Okay.
Correct.
And but then potentially we can gain some other pieces on the north side. Okay, that makes sense to me. Now I'm putting those two images together in my brain. Any other thoughts? It seems like it's exciting. Even though there's only 2 blocks, it makes sense to me to connect it to a more commercial district in there, and it's not hidden, tucked away. And you mentioned a bathroom and break room. Is that for the UTA conductors, operators? Yes. Is that what the name? Drivers is probably not the right term. Okay, operators. So that's for their use. That's what you guys are envisioning. Okay.
Yeah, UTA is in a challenging position where we have many employees that don't have easy access to restrooms, and so as we expand, we try to address that challenge. And so the default approach is the installation of just a kind of an off-site little small building to provide that. And through collaboration, we're thinking that a space within the RDA property or within the RDA development might be a better fit.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense when we're developing the law to include something that makes sense there for everybody. And I know that there is, certainly I talked about public bathrooms before, that they are well maintained and clean and safe, and so this could be a greater conversation later. Board Member Petro.
Can I ask just some technical questions on the appropriation from 2021? Was that made directly to UTA, or is it a pass through from the city to?
It's TTIF funds. And so UDOT facilitates an agreement with UTA, and it goes from...
So we don't have to worry about that?
You don't have to.
Do we
do,
assume that the 12 million is still enough? And if it's not, we have commitment that the difference will be allocated to this, so we're not going to get halfway through that block?
We've been through those stages.
Okay.
And the 12 million was not enough. And the city has applied for additional funding, additional TTIF funds, rather than an earmark, but through the competitive program. And it appears that the application has been successful.
Okay.
And that will fill that gap.
And so then our cost out of RDA funds will be mostly the public infrastructure that's going to be here. All the rest of that is going to be handled through TTIF and UTA, correct? Okay.
Yeah, as far as we know now, but as we move towards, as we explore more and go through the plating process and whatnot, and then RFP process, that might change, but that's, yeah.
Board Member Young.
Thank you. So I just want to emphasize the support for the RFP preparation to include that affordable housing component, especially building on the board's earlier discussion about the affordable housing funding priorities for the upcoming fiscal year, wanting to create more of those opportunities in high opportunity areas. I think this property has a lot of potential and would really complement that existing landscape. So thank you for that effort, and I hope to see it included as we move forward. The other thing I just wanted to provide thanks for is the incredible staff, Lynn, John, everyone working in transportation, Leah with the community engagement side. All of these individuals basically are all honorary members of District 7 because you live, breathe, and probably even receive in your sleep emails from our constituency. And we're just incredibly grateful for all of the expertise that you continue to provide as we address these projects and needs to help improve the community. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Anybody else? Did I miss anybody? Okay. Thank you for the update. I appreciate this.
Thank you.
Moving on the agenda, there doesn't seem to be any reports of announcements from the executive director. I think we are okay there. I see that there is reports and announcements from the RDA staff at the table. Danny Waltz. Thank you.
I will be quick, Mr. Chair, because I'm sure you're all tired of hearing from me at this point. But
we're never tired.
We do appreciate the extra time today and loaded agenda. So I will start with the not so good news, which is an update on the RFP process for the Sunday Anderson Senior Center RFP. Some of you may already know that due to a procurement-related conflict of interest, the county had to rescind that award. So that's unfortunate. They are still looking at to what extent, how, and if they will put this procurement out again. So we continue to work with them on that, and we'll keep you posted as we move forward.
Quick question on that. Is there any requirement from our side on our piece of the commitment to that? Certainly I prefer that we stay at the table, even through this longer process than hoped. Is there anything that we need to do from our side?
There's nothing we need to do as part of allocating those funds as a board. It was always make them available to the county in terms of what their willingness and ability is to incorporate housing in the project. So we will continue to do that, encourage that, make sure they know those funds are available, and continue to let everyone know that that's what we'd like to see happen. So not to say other politicians may not be able to strong arm them if you so choose, but okay, two other quick updates. Number one, the Bicycle Collective new hub in the Grand Rio District is done. They have scheduled their grand opening celebration for Thursday, May 2nd, 3 p.m. Mayor Mendenhall, Chair Pui are scheduled to be speakers. I think the rest of you, we've reached out to your schedulers, so should be on your calendar. If not, here's your reminder. So we're excited to celebrate that. And then quick update on the fact that we closed on our $2.1 million affordable housing loan for Victory Heights 1 and 2 last month. This is the conversion of the medical office building at 1060 East, 100 South. This former medical building will be converted into 88 units of affordable housing. 66 of those will be studio units. 18 of those will be 3-bedroom, and 4 will be 4-bedroom. Of those 88 units, 18 of them will be affordable to households at 40% AMI or less. And then the remaining 70 will be affordable between 41 and 60% AMI. So it's a project we're excited for. Conversion of office, east side, family housing, and affordability. So it checked a lot of the boxes for us in terms of priorities. So that loan is closed. They're already doing demolition and remediation. Should hopefully be done in May of 2025. That's all we have for updates.
I want to thank you for sending those updates ahead of time. Like, I really appreciate that. I mean, I know that we ask you to do this, and it means a lot to me to wrap my head around some of these things. Obviously, and not necessarily in this case, but it is really nice to feel prepared about what the things that you are talking. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
You
I go
to
through
you
quick.
and your stuff.
Thank you.
Moving on, is there any reports from you, Vice Chair?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I don't have anything to report. There's not written briefings. We are moving also to the consent agenda. We need to approve some items on the consent agenda. So I need something.
Move for approval.
Second.
And we are moving to approve the whole consent agenda. Okay. I have a motion by Board Member Petro and a second by Board Member Dugan. Any discussion on this item? Okay, I'm gonna call the question. All of those in favor say aye.
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 Everybody said their thing, so this motion passes unanimously. There is no closed session, so this meeting is adjourned. Madam Council Chair, when do you want?
On the agenda?
4 p.m.
Yep.
Just a little break here, so thank you, everyone.